I guess we can just talk about why are you making the argument that he is racist?
Everything that he's presented suggests to me that he's racist. But it might be the case that he's not. I'm not really concerned with if he's actually racist. I'm concerned with how he's teaching it to his students.
This video is a direct response to Michael Moreno, who recently posted a video about his professor Ryan Walsh stating that he is an anti-white racist. Now, before I get any further, I'd like to clarify a few things. I am a former debater. My name is Tommy. I did 2 years of high school debate from 2014 to 2016. And 2 years of college debate from 2016 to 2018. It was during my final year of debate in August of 2018. Now, when Ryan joined the Weber State team, he was not director, he was just a coach, so he only held arguments, and we were under a different director at that time. So he had no jurisdiction about how the program was run. He didn't have anything to do with how money was spent or the curriculum, etc., etc. Now, let me tell you 3 things about me that are relevant to this video. 1, I know that space is real. I'm an aerospace engineer major. I've been dreaming about going to space since I was in the 6th grade. I'm currently working on several NASA scholar programs. So this brings me to the second thing about me, which is that I know that science is not racist. And so given these 2 points about me, it's also important to know that 3, I do not support sending an entire race of people to outer space to colonialize other planets. I assure you that if I knew anybody who wanted to get rid of an entire race of people, I would not associate myself with them. And so why am I, a strong supporter of science and space technology and person who is very clearly against racism, defending Ryan Walsh, the racist, anti-white, science skeptic professor? It's an answer you won't really expect or understand, but it's because Ryan is also a supporter of science and is nowhere near the racist that you would think he is based on Michael's video. All of the audio is cut and taken out of context. He does not hate white people. He does not have a biased racial agenda that he is supposedly forcing down the throats of the debaters. He's in actuality a debate coach who does not believe the arguments he makes, but simply makes them purely for argumentation's sake. He also allows all arguments, so long as they are strongly persuasive and well prepared. What's really going on is that Michael made his video because Ryan didn't let him debate, and so he's lashing out. But it's important to understand the specifics of why he wasn't allowed to debate, and that it had nothing to do with his race. It wasn't because Michael didn't want to run the racial arguments that Ryan supposedly only allows his debaters to run. It was because Michael was making a space policy that just was not persuasive enough. And so as a coach, Ryan took the obligation of not allowing a non-persuasive argument into a debate tournament because he knew that he would lose. That would be a waste of the university's money and a waste of his time. This is the same concept as benching a player on the court or on the field who's just not playing well. You want players who are going to get you points, get you the W, get you the win. Forgive me if I look different or if my background looks different in some of these clips because I'm recording this over the course of a couple days. I have a lot of things to do, but I'm trying to set aside time to do this whenever I can. But moving on. Now, these are a lot of substantial claims I'm making here, but I'm going to be providing evidence and explanation for every single one as to why they are true, in order to prove that Ryan Walsh indeed is not a racist and that Michael Moreno is in reality the boy who cried wolf. So the constant thing you're going to be hearing me talk about throughout this video is context. Why does it matter? Because if you don't have context, you could be mad about the wrong things for the wrong reasons. So as you can see from the beginning of this video, we do have a direct quote of Michael saying that he's not necessarily concerned if Ryan Walsh is actually racist, but that he is more concerned with that the content he is teaching is racist. So we are going to be applying that throughout the video and going into just the specific details about why his teachings aren't necessarily racist, because he isn't approving of them. He is presenting them, and he entirely welcomes proving these statements wrong. So we need to understand what's going on here in terms of how college debate works. In any debate event throughout America, that is in different events such as Public Forum, Lincoln Douglas, Policy Debate, Parley Debates, all debaters are expected and required to flip on both sides of a topic. That is, for example, if the topic is about gun control, debaters will have to argue for and against gun control. So given this setting, debaters, even if they don't agree with the side that they are on, they will have to learn how to win that side. What this causes is, even if you're arguing for a position that you don't necessarily believe in, it causes you to gain an understanding of how those positions are defended in the first place. And then you kind of learn how to beat those arguments when you flip on the other side and you're opposing them. It is very important to understand this fact about being a debater if you're going to form an opinion about Michael Moreno or Ryan Wash. Michael doesn't explain this fact because it would be disadvantageous to him. What I'm going to be arguing next is that all of the audio clips, and I mean all of them, are taken out of context and are predicated on the fact that Michael doesn't realize that Ryan doesn't necessarily believe in all the arguments he's talking about, because he has quite literally taught the opposite side of these arguments. Because college debate is a competitive event, debaters will not necessarily talk about arguments that they believe in. Rather, they will go for arguments that will garner them a W. What's the most successful, what gets them the most ballots in a tournament. So, for example, in one round, if a debater is on the negative, they could say that capitalism is the root cause of all the affirmative problems, and because the affirmative doesn't do anything about this, they lose because they never get to the root cause of their problems. Whereas in the next round, that same debater could now be on the affirmative and ends up being in a position where they end up having to defend capitalism, saying that capitalism is an effective economic system which saves billions of lives. In this context, what has happened here from Michael's video is that Michael has taken instances of Ryan talking about one side of an argument and makes it seem as that's his only side, and completely negates and ignores the fact that Ryan will talk about and teach the opposite side of that argument. So this brings us to the first major point that Michael makes about Ryan, which is that he has an agenda where he only approves of arguments he agrees with, and they have to be racially motivated. This point is entirely false and not true at all. Right now, everyone thinks that Ryan is a black terrorist. He's racially motivated. He is a anti-white hotep, which if you've only seen Michael's videos and have never participated in academic debate, yeah, sure, it makes perfect sense why you would believe that. I mean, he goes out of his way to make a pretty compelling video, but it's taken out of context, and so therefore the ethics behind his video is quite bad and puts a completely innocent professor in a bad light. The reason this assumption is wrong is due to the fact that Ryan coached two white debaters who made the argument that whiteness isn't real, it doesn't exist, and it's all made up in your head. Ryan coached a team to make that argument. So one of these two white debaters is named Zach Baker. Baker did an interview with a YouTube channel named Benjamin Boyce. So let's go ahead and play a clip from that interview.
Ryan Wash has never done anything, in my experience with him, that would indicate any sort of racism. As a student for him who was white, that I never felt demeaned because of that. And in fact, Ryan did everything in his power to increase the education I was getting from debate and the opportunities that I had. And not just because I was running SJW arguments. In fact, a lot of the arguments I chose to go for in debate were very much against kind of the progressive liberal position. Ironically, like the clearest example that Michael gives in his video of an argument that Ryan would not have allowed him to run, the idea that whiteness and white privilege is fake and made up, is an argument that I went for multiple times under his supervision. The argument we'd make is that whiteness as a social structure isn't material, it's in your head, you made it up. And by bringing all of that baggage into debate, you're just reperforming your own oppression. It only has power if you give it power. We made that argument a lot, and Ryan helped us become the best advocates for that position. So he certainly does not let his personal attachments to particular ideas get in the way. He would help us read arguments which are arguably the exact opposite of that.
Now, a common response I have seen against Baker's video is that we can't trust his personal account, and that because Michael has evidence, we have to default to his, which would be perfectly fine if we didn't have evidence, but we do. This is Weber State University's Department of Communication, Faculty and Staff website. If we go scroll down here to Ryan Wash and click on his name, and we will see that during 2018-2019, he became Director of Forensics at Weber State University. So let's remember that year, 2018-2019, right? Now we're going to go to this website. It's called Open Case List. It's essentially a Wikipedia for college debate. Debaters will post their current arguments or previous arguments they have ran in order for other teams to look at, research, and prepare against them so that when they run into each other, there will be more productive, more prepared debates. Right, so since we're talking 2018-2019, let's look at Archive Case List and click on 2018-2019. Now, during this year, we're going to click on Weber State. Then we're going to look at this team here, Weber, Baker, and Thied. Let's look at their negative arguments. Looks like the negative arguments they ran most of the time was Baudrillard and topicality. Topicality is an argument saying that because you're not talking about the topic, you should lose. Simple enough, right? And then the other argument is John Baudrillard. I will have our guest explain that argument very soon here. But what we're more concerned about right now is this round right here. Weber tournaments, round 7 versus ASU Wyoming GH. Judge is David Kilpatrick. And let's see the round report. That's basically the summary of the round, right? So the 1AC, which is the first affirmative constructive, was black queer mothering. Whatever that is. I have no idea what that is, but that's what it was, right? And our friends, Baker and Thied, ran Baudrillard and T against this team. And the first affirmative rebuttal, the 1AR, they told Baker and Thied that they were racist and perpetuate settler colonialism. Wow, kind of sounds like what maybe perhaps Ryan would say to them, right? Well, let's find out. Now we're going to look at the results of that round. We are looking at tabroom.com. Tabroom.com is the hub world for college debate and high school debate. Essentially, colleges and high schools that are hosting debate tournaments will post their tournaments on this website, and other schools will sign up to their tournament on this website. Then, when the schools show up to the tournament, the website will post who's debating who, and then the results of that round. All of these websites are public access, by the way. I'm going to be posting links in the description below. Anyway, so we're looking at tabroom.com. We're looking at the Mukai Classic 2018, and we're looking at the Open Division round 7, right? Because we're talking about round 7, Weber, right? So let's scroll down. We have Weber BT round 7 against ASU. David Kilpatrick. Yep, it all looks the same. Now let's see who won that round. The negative, our friends Weber BT. So this here is a forwarded email from Baker's partner during one of his debate rounds during the 2018-2019 school year. This email is a forward you see here from the Northwestern Tournament round 8, Weber versus Rutgers. I'm going to be censoring all of the debaters' emails for their privacy concerns. But you can see here that the email is post dated as Sunday, February 3rd, 2019 at 5:07 p.m. And let's get into the body of the email that was sent to their opponents, right? So this is what we call these are cards. Cards are read during debate rounds. Basically, as how they're structured is we have the tagline, which is like the argument that the debater is trying to make through the evidence. Then they read the author's name and year, and then they have the copy pasted body of the text that they pulled it from, and they highlight and bolden the parts that they're reading, kind of to like annotate the evidence. They can do this as long as it makes sense the way they're reading it. So let's go ahead and get into this evidence that is particularly damning to Michael's narrative that Ryan only allows arguments about we need to talk about racism or whatever. This evidence is titled, "The pursuit for a vision of authentic blackness is empirically false and amounts to nothing more than a phantasm sold by corporate cultural industries. Don't fall for the illusion of race." That's by Guadalupe and Ruijin 14. Now let's get into the body of that evidence. It states, capitalism is global mode of production and obliterator of incommensurables, is about producing the real where no real exists, luring customers to think that there are things in life that still have exclusive value, while all along they are part and parcel of exchange and sign value. Baudrillard, 2001. Black music is part of this chimera. The offspring of enslaved Africans behave as though black music belongs to them, a magical music containing an authentic core that could not be commoditized. They have been enticed by the lure of property rights. Ownership is an attractive poison if the great-grandchildren of those who refuse to be other people's human chattel want to drink from this poisonous chalice. Then the term revolutionary subject needs to be removed from social science encyclopedias. Property is an essential aspect of the production of the real. We are all conscripts of capital. All our cherished cultural properties and natural social identities are actually relational and intersubjective products. This deconstruction and unveiling of transracial power asymmetries does not change the fact that black music is sold under an exclusively black label. They continue to package these phantoms as being consonant with the older, nationally induced constructs of race and culture. The black authenticity of real blacks only matters if they too accept the phantasmal black being sold as urban. Basically, what I can gather from this evidence here, I just barely read it here. So, what I can understand from it is that it says that basically black music and black identity is a false notion, fails to recognize how the idea of owning identity and like understanding it from that standpoint, i.e. like whiteness and blackness, doesn't recognize a deeper meaning of where that comes from, which this evidence says that it could be capitalism that produces what's real and what's not. Then they read another piece of evidence saying we should not generate identity skills in debate because the university is a place of surveillance and speed elitist complicity as hoofed intent. Basically, this evidence just saying, like, you know how we've seen a bunch of videos of debaters reading really fast that's critiquing that notion and saying that if you want to talk about identity skills, but in an activity that is like that, where they include spreading, it's counterproductive. So, yeah, this is pretty much saying that racism arguments are bogus. And then we have the hoofed evidence, which I talked about already. Right. So let me get one thing straight here. Ryan does not have an agenda. He's not forcing his debaters to talk about race and all these other things. He doesn't require that as part of being the debate team. When he brings up these arguments, he fully supports and wants his debaters to understand the ins and outs of these arguments so that if they wanted to, or actually when they will have to encounter these arguments in their debates, that they can beat it. Michael never asked if he could run those arguments. It's that simple. In the recordings, Michael asks about a stoicism argument. He talks about his space policy affirmative. But the key point to note here is that Michael never went up to Ryan and asked, can I read an argument that proves whiteness theories and anti-blackness theories are wrong? Instead, he just assumes he can't. And so it's ironic he's talking about these theories requiring that they play victim when quite literally he's doing that to himself. Now, some might ask, well, how come Michael wasn't allowed to make the same arguments as Baker? How come Wash keeps cutting him off? Now, next I have a clip of Ryan coaching a debater on the team on how to beat black identity arguments while defending an affirmative that talks about space policy.
I asked you questions that you know the things you need to work on, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Good. You get how this cross-sex thing goes. It's not to embarrass you, but it's to highlight where I do not want us to stumble in cross-sex. Okay. The big substantive things is one of which is there's an impact concern. This evidence is good. It's just, it's not doing it for me as a terminal impact. You know what I'm saying? This app needs a clear extinction impact, right? But it also needs a scenario for that extinction, right? So what really happens? I get the like time frame evidence stuff, but it doesn't seem to conclude that the world is done. Does that make sense, right? Because kind of where you want to be, especially in regards to like the latter questions that I was asking about black people and shit.
Yeah.
Where you want to be is like, look, none of that shit really matters if everybody is in smithereens. Does that make sense? And the problem is, it's always something more important. Some always more important. Some always more important until it's too late. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That's the energy that I want the app to become with. That's kind of the energy I want the 2AC to have. That's the energy even in the 2AR. I don't give a fuck about your social ills that are happening today, because there will be no social.
Hey, can you
Tomorrow.
cover a pasta at 5
Do you
period?
understand what
I
I'm
have
saying?
an emergency.
So who cares if black people went to space? Right? Okay. Who cares? Absolutely, who gives a damn? Not relevant at all. And probably black people shouldn't go to space because they'll get fucked up out of the debris that's there now. Says our evidence.
So let's give some context to Michael's recordings. The recording about sending whites to space and the space is not real stuff, it's not during a debate, it's during a lecture, it's during a practice where the debaters are presenting their arguments for everybody to give their opinion about. Had Michael asked to read arguments about why whiteness is wrong, he would have eventually found himself in a debate round where he gets a whole 15 minutes of speech time to say why whiteness theories are wrong. Now, I need to give you all an explanation of how policy debate works for you all to understand this next part. In intercollegiate policy debate, you have the resolution, which I will put somewhere here. As you can see, it says resolved, the United States federal government should establish a national space policy substantially increasing its international space cooperation, yada, yada, yada. Basically, the resolution is something that everyone is kind of where they situate their arguments about, right? And the resolution stays the same for the whole academic year from around June until March of the following year. And then you have two teams of debaters during one round, the affirmative and the negative. The affirmative proposes an idea under the resolution, and the negative says why that idea under the resolution is bad. And whoever wins, whether or not their idea is bad or not, wins the debate, basically. Now, here's where things get tricky about policy debate. The rules behind policy debate are very light in terms of what content of argument is allowed. Traditionally, the affirmative is supposed to talk about a governmental policy that is related to the resolution. And the negative would then say stuff about like why the affirmative, or the AF for short. I know in Michael's video, there's a lot of the word AF and nobody knows what it means. It stands for affirmative, or the affirmative case. The negative would say why the AF is bad. By saying you're not topical enough, the resolution requires substantial funding, but your AF only offers some funding, therefore you should lose because the negative has to prepare against topical teams. Or they could say something like your AF would be too expensive and causes a shock in the economy, which would lead to resource wars, etc., etc. Basically, the only hard set rules in policy debate right now are the speech times, which I will show right here. Besides the speech times, everything else is basically free game. If somebody reads an argument that typically would be perceived as very offensive or outrageous, we can't call the tournament officials and have them be disqualified. We have to debate against them and beat them. This is because in policy debate, the only thing that is hard to find is the speech times. The resolution, what the affirmative should be saying, what the negative should be saying, it's all up for interpretations for the debaters in every round, and it's up to the judge to either vote affirmative or a negative. Now, this isn't to say that debaters don't talk about the resolution at all. The content of debates is based around the meta of what the region they're in. The West Coast likes to talk about critical arguments and questions the assumptions we have in debate. The East Coast is very much more traditional. They talk about the policies promoted under the resolution. So on the East Coast, they would be talking about space policy, or on the West Coast, they'd be talking about all these critical things that Michael kind of talks about in his video. Now, because of this divide in the metas, there's two national tournaments every year. The West Coast has the Cross-Examination Debate Association, CEDA for short, and the East has the National Debate Tournament, or the NDT for short. Now, something that's important to understand about debate is that outrageous arguments are ran all the time. That is because the goal isn't really to find the truth or talk about what's really at hand. Rather, it's to argue the best. And whether or not your arguments are true or not doesn't really matter. As long as you're the best at arguing, you win. Typically, he should have only been able to win CETA and not the NDT, but him and his partner were the first debaters in the entire history of policy debate to ever unite the crowns, which means that they won both the NDT and CETA. The reason he won the NDT was a lot more complicated than Michael seems to be. It's not just because people want to give false wins because they feel bad for black gay debaters. It's quite literally because Ryan and his partner Elijah did a really good job debating. The decision in that round at the NDT where Ryan is talking about debate as a home, the decision was 3 votes for the affirmative to 2 votes for the negative. That means they were 1 vote away from losing that round. And one of the judges who voted affirmative, they left a 10-page paper about why they voted affirmative. So it's a lot more than, oh, people feel bad. It's quite literally like whoever argued best. And so Ryan was able to pull off argumentatively his critical arguments in the NDT where people typically sway more to traditional debate and won. So there's a part in Michael's video where he's asking one of the debaters if words can have different interpretations because they're running a critical argument. And he's like, well, you're supposed to talk about the topic. Well, given that I just gave this context about how debate can be outrageous sometimes, it kind of answers his little instance of this question. And actually, he kind of forgets to include this part of that video audio where Ryan is actually critiquing this debater as well and is cross-examining them. I'm going to include that clip right now.
Why vote affirmative? What's happening?
Okay. We think that there are dominant norms inside
Awesome,
of the
great.
debate community.
Talking
Flipping
about the
that
ass,
script
not
is
the
an
fucking
action and
school.
a method. We think that encouraging those different stories inside a debate is a good thing.
The affirmative is an encouragement of storytelling. That's where we're at.
Yeah, that's where we're at. But
Just
to expand.
you encourage storytelling.
We also perform the stories. We
I
have the
understand.
stories.
So that's another reason to vote affirmative. So we encourage storytelling, and then we tell stories.
Yeah,
Okay, so who have you encouraged to tell stories?
each other.
Each other.
That was
Okay,
one
so
that we had definitely done.
so check that one off the list. Vote negative on presumption. Got it. Are there other people?
Prompt
Why
plan.
insert your narratives in that dominant discourse? Why wouldn't it just be drowned out? A drop in the bucket, maybe?
If it was drowned out, I think that more and more affirmatives are heard of and more affirmatives are seen the more that they compete and the longer they get in those competitions.
Okay.
That's the reason why we asked for
This is your
ballots.
second year of college today, yeah?
Yeah.
Last year, in the top 25, 16 of the 25 teams were critical teams that did not defend the resolution in a traditional normative way. So I'm concerned just about your inherency argument. Why do you keep saying that the debate is written by this dominant discourse that interprets the topic the same way, when the true numerical norm is that people interpret the resolution the way they see fit? What is the inherent barrier to your affirmative?
Because debate right now, the way it is, it's so competition driven, so win driven. As far as we're concerned, with Ryan talking about race as much as he does, he's just playing the game. He doesn't want to make everyone play the games the same way that he does, but he does want them to play the game in a way that makes them win. So if that's in talking for and against whiteness, sure. If it's talking about policy, sure. What he cares about is winning. So there's this part in the video that Michael includes where Ryan makes his supposed ridiculous sexual assault claim about how using the topic is rapey.
Cooperate or have influence on your space, for instance. And so it could be argued that the topic is really rapey if we understand space differently, because it will require external influence on how you move throughout space. Because space is not just...
So basically, he's talking about arguments that other teams will run, not what he wants to run. Okay, so now we're getting to the point where I'd love to talk about this next point, which is the space is not real argument. The way Michael articulates this argument is that Ryan believes it to be true, that Ryan doesn't actually believe space is real. Ryan knows that space is real. He knows that space is real, and he doesn't think science is racist. So next, I'm going to include a clip of Ryan talking about how ridiculous or silly he thinks this argument is.
Here's my argument, and most of y'all are gonna think I'm crazy, but I don't care. And I've been talking to a lot of friends about it, and they think I'm crazy, but I don't care. I am sold on it. On one hand, people can be like, well, then what's outside the stratosphere? Well, some people might say heaven. Some people.
As you can see from Ryan laughing, saying that this is going to be crazy, and then laughing about it with everyone, you can see that he doesn't actually believe it. Next, I'm going to include a clip where Ryan is saying that the debaters don't have to use this argument if they don't want to. It was just an idea he had, and that if he ran into it, the first words out of his mouth would be, "This is bullshit." Roll a clip.
Because we don't need to write a Ryan app. I just got really excited about something. That's what I would write. The first words out of my mouth would be like, "This is bullshit." But
Now, I'm not done driving in this point quite yet that Michael took this out of context, because I actually have evidence from Michael's own audio recordings that Ryan actually is talking about why topical arguments are good.
I want to start there. Solar panels could drastically help minority communities, et cetera, et cetera. I think we speak from a very unique position on this. I'm not sure if you all know this, but Weber State is powered mostly by solar panels. And so we can kind of speak from, maybe not the position of black and brown people per se, but we can definitely speak from a position of what it's like to be, or what it's like to have solar-based power. The Black Framework argument. Don't get scared, it's not really about rain. Never gonna. But the Black Framework argument says this is something that we could read against critical teams. And our argument here is a little bit different from traditional framework, but the argument here is that the affirmative must defend the implementation process of a policy enacted by the federal government. This is different than traditional debate, mostly because most traditional debate will require you to fiat a plan, and fiat means that you would bypass a discussion of implementation, right? This argument is motivated by a couple of things. One of which is some Rashad Evans stuff about the importance of switch side debate for black people and testing convictions. The second is a lot of arguments about why black people have been forbidden to participate in political processes, one just literally by the law until the 60s. Sweet, but that argument is about how when we engage in critical models of debate, and don't include a discussion of implementation, that is consistent with a legacy of denying black students and youth in particular of engaging in political discourse and political processes. And so it's an interesting way to kind of challenge people on their choice to not read a topical plan.
Now, there's just two more cuts from Michael's audio that I really want to show here to prove that Ryan includes all types of debate, whether it's critical or traditional. And I think it's important that you all hear it too.
I don't want it to be like Weber is the performance debate program or the policy debate program. Weber houses all the different styles of debate. We can do whatever you all want to do. My only ask is that if you want to do it, you help me do it. I'm not going to do it all for you unless you're the only time, and the only time I do work for you all is now in the preseason, and I mean preseason. Once we go to ASU, I'm out until you get to elims. I will prep for your next debate, but you have to make it to elims. If it's a critical AF, you need framework answers, you need CAP answers, you need anti-blackness answers, you need sec hall answers. The big four. That makes sense? If it's a policy AF, then your app file probably needs to be a bit more expansive, right? We need to have multiple advantages. Multiple advantages, at least two, right? Because we'll need those. We'll also expect for us to be starting to think about what our approach is to spending, what our approach is to pro-lit, what our approach is to politics, what our approach is to the K. And I'm just going to leave the K as the K right now. But obviously we would need more specific answers, right? So when I say the K, like, what is the framework of the affirmative? Is that compatible with K stuff? Are we talking about realism being good? Is hegemony kind of the structuring, organizing principle of the affirmative? Also, like, is ontology good, real, bad, fake? Just basic things to start answering critical arguments. Okay? Okay. I'm not done. For the negative, everybody needs to list whatever they're working on somewhere in the Slack so I know and so I can chime in. I expect for there to be an ability for anybody to debate anybody.
Now, the last thing I want to say that about the space is real argument, the core of the argument is not that space is not real, so we should only confer to experiential evidence. Basically, the argument behind it is that it's not even saying that science is racist either. Nobody believes, not even Ryan believes that science is racist. I certainly don't believe that science is racist. The argument is that science is often taken advantage of by people who have like unethical agendas. For example, like Nazi scientists doing scientific like science experiments on Jews, or eugenics, or the Tuskegee Airmen experiments where black World War II veterans were told that they had free health care and were purposely not given any treatment for their syphilis just so the US Health Department could see what would happen. And so the argument here is saying that Ryan is saying is that because black communities don't have a lot of access to science and engineering, technology, whatever, that they should reserve skepticism towards science theories so that it isn't used against them like it was in the past. Now, personally, what I would have said in response to this argument is, why don't we give funding to these communities for science education so that we don't have to be saying that space isn't real? That is something that Ryan totally would have allowed me to say. Next topic. This is probably going to be the hardest one to explain and get into detail, but it's the whole send white people to space argument. This one is the reason why I had to give context about how the way debate works and the current meta of debate, right? So we're going to see how that comes into play with this argument here, okay? So just bear with me, right? Again, I don't believe the argument. I don't support the argument. I'm just here to give context. The argument is around the theory of whiteness and anti-blackness. There's a bunch of literature on it, and basically the debaters are using that literature as an argument here. It's just basically, it's a theory. Anti-blackness is a theory about the world, how it's structured. That's about it. It doesn't really argue. It says that race is not epidermal, which you can hear Ryan say, which means that it's not about literal skin color. It's about the way society is built. Again, if you like, I'm butchering the explanation behind this argument, but basically, if you think this argument is ridiculous, that's fine. It doesn't offend me. I'm not defending the argument. I'm just explaining it. You are completely allowed to be critical of this theory. It goes a lot deeper than the way I explain it, but that's just like the grossest explanation I can give of it in the most simplest terms. But because it's being read in the context of debate tournaments, where you have to beat everything argumentatively, it forces debaters to have to give substantive reasons why their theory is wrong. And what I'm saying is, if you want to prove this theory wrong, you can. Right now, debaters are having a problem proving it why it's wrong. If you want to be a part of the cause to resist this argument, go ahead and join debate and prove it wrong. One explanation I received from one of the assistants at Weber State is, no one is actually arguing in real life for white people to leave. This is an argumentative fiction. It's attempting to imagine a world where black people don't have to deal with whiteness constantly. Whiteness being the idea, this phenomenon in society that kind of results in securitizing life for white people, whatever, right? So all they want to do is they just want they want to imagine a world where whiteness doesn't cause oppression for black people. Now, the difference between saying get rid of all white people and get rid of all black people is that there are actually people who want to get rid of all black people, like the KKK, for example. The debaters here don't actually want to get rid of white people. Another thing about the whiteness argument, it's saying that the argument is saying that white people are already looking to leave the planet, and the poetry assumes they can and have the ability of taking care of themselves. So this argument, it's not saying we should kill white people. It's saying that let them go do what they want, which is go off and explore space. The argument is just saying we should go let them do that. It's not saying we should get rid of them and like kill them all. It's saying like let them live their own lives, we will live ours. That's the argument. I'm not saying I'm support against it or whatever. I'm just explaining it again. Now, Michael makes a point about this argument saying that like his teammates aren't asking the right questions about this affirmative argument or this AF, like I explained earlier. That doesn't mean you aren't allowed to ask better ones. If you think the questions suck, that's totally your opinion, and you're welcome to ask better ones. I personally don't think anyone asked that good of questions in this audio. If I were in the room, I would have asked something like, what about sending white people to colonize space means that we resolve the sentiments of colorism in Black and Latino and Asian communities? Then they would answer that by saying how if we get rid of whiteness, then we solve all the problems in the world. Then to that, I would, for example, use the argument that Zach Baker was talking about. And I would then ask, okay, so if we can prove that your theorization about whiteness being the root cause of the impacts of the affirmative case, do we win? Got it, right? So that's something I could say. And then, you know, Baker, if you were here in that room, then he would then go on to read the Guadalupe evidence that we talked about earlier, and et cetera, et cetera. Now, on to the conversation of all white people do whatever, do this, that, the all overarching claim, right? So where they say all white people benefit from whiteness, they are speaking from a position that defends the theory, the literature they were talking about. Again, like we proved before, disproving the theory is totally allowed. Michael's allowed to disprove it. Their opponents are allowed to disprove it. Their judges are allowed to vote against them to disprove it. All of this is allowed. And now Ryan brings up practicality, and he quite literally says that it will lose to arguments made about that. He isn't saying, like, the reason why ethics isn't really a problem here is because everyone understands that this isn't really what they believe in, right? Again, everyone here, at least in the debate room, is, and not even just at Weber State, but the entire country, all debaters, they are way more concerned with winning than anything else. It's important to notify here or make it clear here that if Michael wanted to be the debater that could dismantle and disprove this argument and prove it wrong and have judges vote against it, he could have, just like Zach Baker was, but he didn't. He quit the debate team to make his video. And I really want to emphasize that point here. He could have became a debater that learned how to dismantle these arguments on the national level, but instead he ran away. That's just kind of indicative of the kind of character he has, especially when he's making up this story about somebody who is actually looking out to help him. And what I mean by somebody looking out to help him, Ryan actually wants Michael to be a good debater. He wants all of his debaters to be good debaters. That's the reason why he's coaching them. For example, here's an instance of him giving Michael an explanation about an argumentation theory.
I'm just still confused why it would flip it to affirmative. Why would presumption stop being
Because
negative?
in traditional argument, or traditional, I guess, debate theory, the affirmative has the burden of proof, which means that they are presenting the change. The negative simply has the burden of rejoinder.
Yeah.
However, if the negative then starts to encroach on the burden of proof and offer something separate, then argumentation theory says that then it should flip back to the affirmative because they no longer have to prove that the AF is better than the counter plan. They're only supposed to prove that the AF is better than the status quo. Now it's on the negative to prove that the counter plan or counter methodology is superior to the affirmative, which happens at the level of the linked debate.
Okay.
Not only that, Ryan does not hate white people. He does not hate Michael for being white. I mean, the two debaters I mentioned last year, Zach Baker and his partner, they were both white, and he went out of his way to teach them a lot. And not just arguments like supporting stuff that he supposedly believes in, but arguments that oppose everything that Michael talks about. For example, like one piece of evidence I have that proves that Ryan doesn't hate Michael is he bought him food. It's in the audio recording. Basically, he's ordering Popeyes for the team. He's asking Michael what he wants, and Michael's like, "Oh yeah, chicken."
Where we
So
at?
what I'm worried about, what I'm worried about is that it's just like, oh, this can't happen, or this can't happen, and then like.
How many of us are eating chicken? So 2 veggies. It's just 2 veggies. Ben is good.
You said you got chicken. Yeah.
Now, I know this seems like such a ridiculous thing to point out, Ryan buying Michael chicken, but it's like if Ryan hated Michael, why would he buy him chicken? Like it's not true, man. What's messed up is that Michael here is recording, right, in secret during this audio, and I texted Ryan about this event when he bought the Popeyes, and I asked him, did the school pay for that or did he pay for it out of pocket? And Ryan said that it depends. If a restaurant approves of the tax exemption, the school will pay for it. But in this instance, Popeyes did not approve of the tax exemption from the Weber State debate team, so Ryan paid for it out of pocket. So we have here Ryan buying food out of his pocket from Michael, and he's taking advantage of that and is like, huh, thanks for the chicken, but fuck you, I'm gonna make a video to make people think you're racist. I mean, come on, man. You could have at least not asked for chicken. You could have been like, oh, I'm good because I'm gonna post a video about you soon. But no, you let him buy you chicken. That's fucked up, man. Who does that? That's fucked up. Anyways, getting back to the topic at hand. So a lot of point of contestation people have about the whiteness argument is that there's a point where Ryan says, don't take questions from him because he's white. So how do I explain this in the most simplest terms possible without like making it seem like I'm making up bullshit? Earlier I said the affirmative is speaking from a position that defends the theory of anti-blackness. What they are arguing is that they are trying to imagine a world where whiteness does not exist, right? So the reason Ryan tells them not to answer questions, at least in the way that Michael wants, because he's white, it's not because like they hate white people. That's not true. It's because if they answer his questions in the way that he wants, like the whole idea of imagining a world without whiteness gets shattered, because it's still there if Michael's like there answering questions. It's more about like them kind of strategically skirting questions that people ask of them to seem more persuasive. This isn't unique to the whiteness argument. Actually, a lot of debaters do this in terms of like skirting questions that people ask them. It's not just race debaters, it's gender debaters, it's critical debaters, it's policy debaters. For example, if I had an argument about escaping the planet due to an impending asteroid coming to destroy the Earth, and someone asked me, if we prove that there's no risk of an asteroid, do we win the debate? I would answer by saying, no, because I will argue that there are several other reasons to vote affirmative and independent of an asteroid. That's that right there. It's kind of skirting like because the way they posed it was a yes or no question, but I turned it into a more of like it's more nuanced than that, which is not the answer that the negative team or the opposing team would want. All debaters do this. They always answer questions in like the most bullshitting way possible, and that's what these debaters are doing here. Again, I'm not defending it. I'm not saying that's right. I'm saying that is just a strategic decision they are making to make themselves seem more persuasive to the judges who will be judging the debate rounds. Now, this is another point that I really want to emphasize about this conversation. The reason Ryan is shutting down Michael during this conversation is because, again, they're in a context where they're all supposed to be proposing their affirmative arguments and have everyone question them, right? What's going on here is Michael is asking way too many questions and taking up space for other people to ask questions. He's asking a question on top of question on top of question when everyone's supposed to take a turn to ask a question. And quite literally in the audio, Ryan says, like when Michael says, what does it have to do about me? Ryan says, what does that have to do with your question about the affirmative?
Subject anyway.
How would that play out?
What
Like not letting someone question you because they're white.
I mean, I didn't say you couldn't question me. You just might not get the answers you want.
Like I'm not going to answer you, or what do you mean? So I can't ask you a question because I'm white.
You were asking several questions, and I'm
Right,
answering
but you're
them
saying
all.
you wouldn't answer them because
I'm
of white.
answering them all.
You're
I've
answering my
answered
question
every
about your
you've
question.
asked. I've answered every question you asked.
Yeah,
You are
you
not
have.
satisfied. You have not been satisfied. Their evidence, their affirmative is about. It's not really about racism, which deals more with the domestic American thing. What they're talking about is anti-blackness and how the world is structured.
Yeah.
It's an ontological.
My problem,
What's the issue?
if one white person says something racist to a black person, why am I guilty of that? Why do you treat me as if I did that?
What does that have to do with your complaint about the affirmative?
Well, because he.
I'm not about to keep answering these questions. Do you have a question about the F? Do you have a suggestion? It's not your F.
No,
This next point I want to talk about, you can dismiss it if you want. It's going to be my own personal account, but in my encounters with Ryan, I know that he does not treat white debaters in a different way. He may treat Michael in a different way because the way Michael is, but it's not because he's white. It's because Michael is just like a difficult debater to coach. The Ryan I know personally, he has done a lot of really nice things for people. His first year as a coach on the team, not as director, as coach, I wasn't debating there when he was director. We had a Halloween party at his house. His roommate was a white woman, believe it or not. Ryan personally has helped me through a lot of like personal trials, and he goes out of his way to like buy food for the debaters and pay for their travel fees and their hotel room fees and all this stuff. And it's just the fact that I have to make this video is ridiculous.
I'm not really concerned with if he's actually racist. I'm concerned with how he's teaching it to his students.
Even Michael in his own interview says maybe it's the case that Ryan isn't racist, but the stuff he is teaching is racist. So we're going to focus on that fact, right? And we've practically gone over like a majority of the content that he's been teaching, and it's that he doesn't believe it. Sure, you may think that the content is racist. Sure, go ahead. But like, is he defending it? Is he saying that it's right? No, he's presenting them, right? It's all argumentative. It quite literally is devil's advocates type of scenario. He doesn't actually believe these arguments. Now on to the question of the stoicism argument that Michael talks about, that he states that Ryan shuts down, right? So Ryan says it can be a good theory until applied. Again, he personally doesn't have a problem with the philosophy. What he is saying is that in his 10 years of debate experience, what he has seen in debates, he knows that it's just not a strong enough argument and it will lose in debates. My main argument is that Ryan is a debate coach who wants to win, and at best his actions can be brought down to his motivation to win, not for his motivation for Black identity narratives. Now, so about the stoicism argument, essentially, yeah, I mean, it says things sucks, get over it. Not only is that, but the way that interpretation is, like the way that Michael makes it, they don't advocate for just addressing oppression. It's also a personal philosophy, not something that you're like, oh, get over yourself. It's obvious why just get over it is not a viable strategy. It's not persuasive. But even given this, here's some audio that Michael doesn't include that will give a ton of context. Ryan, even though he knows this is a crappy argument, he's still giving Michael the benefit of the doubt. He's just letting him know of the dangers ahead.
No other way to respond.
Like, I don't understand the concept. I understand them very well. I don't understand if people will vote for them. I get that you're frustrated with identity and stuff in debate, which is cool. I'm on board with you in regards to that. I don't think the response to that can be, well, you can just not be upset about the fact that racism and race.
I think that stoicism's a good philosophy, independent of like my problems with identity politics. Like, how come?
Because you haven't made an argument. You just keep saying that people can do stuff with no evidence. Show me something. Show me something.
Well, like this is just an idea.
Show
I'll have to get the cards and stuff, obviously.
Yes,
yeah.
Yeah,
I was just saying that's an idea of what I could run, because you're asking me to find.
And I'm responding, I think, in kind to the ideas and giving you my honest assessment on it.
Okay.
The things that I've brought up to you, the examples that I've brought up to you, I don't think that you have good answers to those. You don't have good answers to rape. You don't have good answers to racial oppression. You don't have good answers to disability.
Okay.
And these are the things that are popular
So,
right now, that everybody could be able to articulate. And your stoicism, the theory, is not going to get out of the context of that.
So, can you just summarize the main things so I can find responses?
No, you need to summarize your argument. You need to produce an argument that is well-rounded and backed by evidence.
Okay.
In regards to those areas. Those are the things that people are going to say. Because
Yeah.
they're not even going to have to defend their app anymore.
Yeah.
They're just going to be like, your stuff is bad, and here's 20 different examples of why your stuff is bad.
Okay. Yeah, I'll actually like get a proper evidence, like evidence and stuff.
The theory starts to fall apart at the level of practicality. Hence your silence in these moments.
Okay, well, I'll look up evidence specifically about those situations.
Yeah, I'm still going to say you're going to have to respond. Even if the theory is good, you still have to respond to what happens in the moment.
People-
That's what's going to be
people can always-
cross-examination.
So we can see from this audio that they have a deep discussion about the way the argument would interact with discussions of rape, racism, and disability. Not that Ryan like says, oh, it needs to be about these. It's saying, he's quite literally saying that this is the meta of debate right now. This is what other people are going to be running, and you have to be prepared for that. At the end of the audio, he's specifically saying, like, you need to have studies about this argument. You need to have evidence and answers to all of it. And Michael's saying, yeah, I'll go ahead and I'll do research on that. And Ryan's saying, okay, yeah, sweet, yeah, do the research. But I'm still telling you, you're not gonna find much, is what Ryan's telling him, right? So there's that conversation in context, and the reason why he shuts it down. It's not because he's white, it's because it's a bad argument, and Michael just doesn't understand that. Another thing I'd like to point out, going back on to the point where I give more context to the Stoicism argument, I'd like to point out there's a point where Ryan says, I get that you're frustrated with identity politics, and I'm on board with you on that. He's quite, like, Ryan, this is a unique instance in which Ryan is agreeing with Michael on his stance on identity politics. But Ryan is saying that, although I agree with you, you need a better approach to answering identity politics. Now, this next part really kind of annoys me. He quotes Ryan reading this argument called the debate K, where he says, like, debate is bad, discussion is bad, blah, 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 and states it as if that's his belief, that's like what he's teaching, what other people should believe, which is really unethical. And this is one of the main reasons you need to be skeptical of Michael, because he misinterprets it as Ryan saying that this is his ideas. Ryan does not believe in this argument. He's presenting it in context to a lecture of possible arguments to run or even talk about.
Moving on. Disfigurement's good. There's a whole bunch of stuff about memory, self-ownership. Oh, there's the debate case.
As you can see, he's literally just reading off arguments on a document. He isn't teaching it as truth. And if you knew anything about Ryan's NDT 2013 debate, in that debate, he uniquely says that debate is good and that debate is a home. Again, this is proof that Ryan doesn't always base his arguments predicated off like truth. That's what his belief is. He always switches sides. But that's not just him. It's everyone. I've seen people argue that he has split personalities. That's not true. Everyone switches sides in debate. Everyone chooses arguments that are beneficial to winning, not to their beliefs or their ideologies. Hopefully by this far into the video, you can understand my frustration with why I even have to make this video in the first place. I hope that's clear enough for you all, seeing so far that Michael has cut out audio in here and has created a narrative that's not entirely true. And some of you might even say that I'm taking it out of context and making up my own story, right? But here's the thing. I'm adding to audio that Michael already showed. There's no way you can argue that I'm creating a story, making it up, because I'm literally giving the audio that plays before and after the parts that Michael shows. Now let's get to the final segment, which is the topic of Ryan not letting Michael debate. It had nothing to do with whiteness. It had nothing to do with Michael being white, or Ryan hating white people supposedly, or Ryan being a tyrant who only wants to talk about race. It had everything to do with Michael simply running a bad argument, and Ryan not wanting to waste university funds on a debater that is going to lose rounds. So next I'm going to play a clip of Ryan having practice with Michael and his partner, whose name I will omit for privacy concerns. In this clip, Ryan is cross-examining Michael and his partner on their affirmative arguments, and for the first minute, everything seems pretty normal.
You ready? Y'all ready for cross-takes?
Sure.
Alright, let's start with solvency.
With what?
Solvency. The plan says the United States federal government fiat does not get you out of international perception of the plan. It gets you out of the current political climate of America, but it does not get you out of international perceptions of that climate.
Okay.
So why would they do it? Why would Putin cooperate with Trump? Cooperation is a two-way street.
So in
not a
that
one-way street.
card, it specifically talks about how the Russian Space Agency wants to cooperate.
2012, when Obama was president. Why Trump, though?
The U.S. federal government
So
isn't.
your argument is the Department of Defense does not deal with international space cooperation.
Well, sure, with defense matters.
But then this is the point where Ryan starts to get concerned.
What our plan is talking about.
Okay.
Yeah.
You sure?
Yeah.
Like, this is not like a debate about race. I'm asking you questions about the
Yeah.
political.
I'm just responding how I would respond in the debate round.
Yeah.
So I want to stop there real quick and point out how Ryan asks if Michael is okay, and even says, we're not talking about race, because he knows Michael doesn't like those arguments. He's trying to make it clear that he's on his side by notifying him that we're not talking about race. He's trying to help him become a better debater. There is no real tension here, right? Ryan is even making sure that Michael's okay, and he's so lax, and he's just in a setting where he's trying to teach his debaters. He even makes a funny little joke.
Next question is about the extinction being 19% possible.
Yeah.
Extinction for who?
Humanity.
Who is that?
All the humans on Earth.
What is a human?
A human is I guess, a Homo sapien, what me and you are, the species that we
I'm
are.
not a Homo sapien. I appreciate that. I'm a homosexual.
Well,
The next portion is kind of long. They get back to talking about debate stuff, but I'm going to put a link on the screen of where you want to skip to if you don't want to listen to the whole thing. It ends on the part where we end on the whole "you can't debate unless you listen to me" part.
okay.
What are you talking about?
What
You're
do
just
you mean?
being real reactive to these questions.
What if not,
What I'm
yeah.
saying is that the resolution has passed us being the United States, to create a policy which would increase
Yeah.
cooperation.
Well, yeah. So,
But what we cannot do is say that the United States and then the Russian federal government will put up X amount of dollars.
So we need
do
to
it.
find incentive for why Russia would work with us.
You need to find a space policy that would incentivize cooperation with Russia. Because we don't have a piece of evidence that says that.
yeah, we can find one. On my answer, because I don't want you to get angry at me because I'm disagreeing with you.
Okay. I don't, actually.
Okay.
Do you have any other questions? No. Those are my suggestions.
If we talk about the Earth getting like destroyed,
You
could
need
you?
to pick, you're trying to read 3 different apps. You need to read one by Humanity. Those are 3 different apps. You need to read one. Pick an idea and run with it, not the hodgepodge approach. If I was you, I would pick option A, but that's just me.
And that was the.
Get off the rock.
Which is the one we're running? Like, colonize.
So I guess what I'm.
Motivating in space. That makes sense?
Ace of point, don't need to beat this horse again, but the card is not about U.S.-Russia relation in China. So it's a bad card for the app. B, people competing with you does not increase the chances of us getting to space. I don't think those are good things, honestly. That's not what I said. I have a problem with people not being coachable. You don't understand why competition increases warming.
I mean, it might in certain field, like maybe like car competition,
I would
more
like
cars.
for you to find one piece of evidence on the world that says that it wouldn't.
Well, what I'm confused. So I mean, it's pretty much just like to make this stronger, we should say. I mean, we're included.
I thought I gave you some pretty good pointers, which is that you should choose one of the 3 apps that you're trying to read and run with it.
So instead of get off the app, like the rock, we could do potentially the one.
Personally, I think the Get Off the Rock app is the strongest of the options.
Okay.
Cooperation with other nations, when you've also read a piece of evidence that says that global warming and climate change is bringing us to our demise.
Well, it's already going to make us extinct, right? That's what the evidence indicates.
Right, but the more that we do it,
Yeah.
the faster extinction comes.
So what if the only way to avoid extinction is to increase the chance a little bit, but we still get to another planet?
I don't think that that's the case. You don't have a piece of evidence that suggests that. That was something that you decided to just slap on to the end of the affirmative. You either make the edits or you don't go. That's your choice.
Okay, so now it's after this point that Ryan stops the cross-examination. They're no longer practicing, all right? Because basically what's happening is Michael he doesn't have a concise story about what his argument's about.
Stop an asteroid.
How does it slow global warming?
It doesn't.
How does it stop deforestation?
It doesn't.
So we're going to die from those things either way.
We might. We aren't guaranteed to.
But you're evident. Okay, we're going to stop this right now.
Okay.
What are you talking about?
So this next clip is probably the most damning part to answering Michael and his narrative that he's made about Ryan. It gives context as to the real reason why Ryan won't let him debate.
You either make the edits or you don't go. That's your choice. I'm not sending anybody out with bad arguments.
I mean, I've told you I don't think they're bad, but
I know. Unfortunately, Weber State did not hire you to think in that regard. You actually paid the university. Everybody in here pays the university, right?
yeah.
They hired me to do that. And if you feel like you know more than me, bro, I don't know what to tell you.
No, it's I have arguments I like. I'm, like you said.
Yes, and I'm trying to help you with them.
I appreciate
This would not be the ask that I read any of those three. But I'm telling you how to refine them and make them better, and you want to debate me about it? I'm not to be debated
I'm
with.
listening to you. I appreciate your.
You have not really done a lot of listening to me.
Listening doesn't mean agree.
Okay.
I'm thinking about what you're saying, processing it, and then I'm thinking about what I think of it.
Notice how Michael is saying, I appreciate you. He acknowledges what Ryan is trying to do for him, but just won't listen to the simple advice of get better evidence. Now, this next clip is just Michael's partner telling Ryan that they're going to do the edits he wants.
Him or
I mean,
least why
you could
he's
say that we could also die because of the U.S.-China war now. That could be another reason why we go extinct, but I don't think you'll ever win the debate on vote F because we're all gonna die, therefore we should improve U.S.-China relations. Like, you're not gonna win that debate.
okay. So we'll make some edits, and when we get here on Sunday, let's run it by you again.
It's good to me.
Okay.
You can hear from Ryan's satisfaction when he says, sounds good. That's all he wanted.
Because we haven't even started talking about next stuff, which you have not given me, and you have less than 36 hours at this point.
Okay, should we talk about next stuff?
Well, you don't have an F, as far as I'm concerned.
Just say you can change it, because I was trying to tell you the same thing. Like, we can't make it a huge, because what I read is all your evidence is like, all this stuff could happen, it's going to be horrible, but maybe it doesn't happen.
Okay.
How does that, you get everybody into it, and then you pull it back into like different territories and make different arguments.
Everybody's
instead of
gonna
just
die. The earth
building
is
upon-
uninhabitable. We need to fucking leave.
Okay,
I don't
well-
know why that's a bad thing to say.
Okay, well, okay, we can think about, look at the F more, come up
I
with
know you
different stuff.
can. It's a question of are you, and it needs to change like city.
Okay.
We've been having the same fucking debate for a week, and I'm tired of debating you.
If you're at this point in the video and you still are on Michael's side, I don't know what to tell you except you are doing the same thing as him and you're just playing victim. Which is ironic because he's the one who's calling us and Ryan the ones who play victim. So everything you've watched up to this point was the meat of the video. I'm practically done here. I'm just gonna wrap it up now. I just got out of the shower. I went to bed at 7 o'clock in the morning last night, making sure this video was out by today. So in this final segment, I'm gonna address Michael's little comments about the policies that Ryan supposedly violates at this point. So he quotes PPM 91 saying that the faculty are entitled to freedom in discussing their subjects, but they should be careful not to introduce their teaching controversial matter which has no relation in the topic in the subject, right? Again, we already went over this. Ryan is teaching debate. Debate is free game right now. That's the meta of the event. I'm not saying that I support it or against it, but that's just the facts. And again, it's not like you can't really argue that there's no relation because that's in context to relation to the topic, but it's still about debate. And you can't prove why it's not. Next, he quotes, faculty should at all times be accurate and exercise appropriate restraint and show respect for opinions of others and should make every effort to indicate that they are not institutional spokespersons. So as far as Ryan's mannerisms and vulgarity, there's two things that happens here in every instance of the audio recording. One, it's when Ryan gives a academic reason why his arguments are good, but Michael just doesn't listen. So then Ryan just changes his mind and says, never mind, it's because I said so now. This is because Michael just won't listen. That's not his default setting. It's not just, oh, because I said so. He has reasons at first. He has logical reasons. And then he goes to, it's not logical anymore. Just do it because I'm tired of this, right? Because Michael like deliberates with Ryan over days about things that should be said and done within one sentence. It's ridiculous. And I mean, I know that Ryan can be vulgar sometimes, but every debate coach I've met swears, and and like gets mad at their students, but like not to the level of like abusive. I mean, what's really funny is Michael on a Reddit post was crying about how Ryan oppresses his white students, right? I asked Michael, okay, Michael, we'll buy your story if you can answer one question for me. How many white students besides yourself feel this way? No response. I'll go ahead and link that in the description below. So, I mean, in terms of Ryan's vulgarity, sure, he can be rude sometimes, but you know what? He gets results. He got 2 debaters last year to the NDT, right? I mean, at best, I can say that he does it because he cares. You know, a lot of coaches you'll see in football, basketball, whatever, they get mad, but you know, they get results. So I can't really say anything else about that. Again, I already went over how it's the same as a basketball coach benching a player who's just not making good shots, he's not making good plays. It's all purely competitive. It has nothing to do with bias or race. And we already went over about how Michael not being allowed to debate is due to him not researching. It has nothing to do with bias. The reason the argument is bad is because Michael is saying impact is not likely, but we should prepare for it, right? The reason why this is bad in the context of the debate is that there are quite literally every other team is going to be arguing that you cause extinction if you are affirmative and they are negative, right? So if you're affirmative and you say that there's no extinction, there's no impact, you lose, right? Because there's basically how debate works is the judge typically will vote for whoever prevents the biggest impact, which is like the biggest bad thing. So if the affirmative is saying, oh, we might prevent extinction, and the negative saying is we definitely prevent extinction, you would vote negative, right? So at the very end of the day, the best and most true argument Michael has is that perhaps Ryan can be rude, but that garners no real argument against Ryan and his reputation as a professor, as a coach. At best, it just kind of proves how sensitive Michael is and how he could have just grown some balls and became a better debater, but really he's just a hurt snowflake and wanted to make a video to feel better about himself and feed his ego. So yeah, that's about it. Thank you for watching. I will be posting a second video soon after I take a couple of exams. It's going to be about the relationship between Zach Baker and Michael Moreno. It is going to be some extrapolations from articles that have statements from Ryan Walsh and one of his assistants. I have some comments about how Michael's supporters are doxing the students at Weber State. So go ahead, please hit the subscribe button and stay tuned for other videos. I'm pretty sure after this whole fiasco is done, I'm probably not going to be making a lot more videos like this. I just wanted to defend my coach who did a lot for me. You can be mad at debate and the meta that occurs in there, but you can't be mad at Ryan Walsh. On that note, I'll just finish with saying, don't hate the player, hate the game.